to improving execution. It's not what you know, it's what you do. My name is Christopher DeCenso. I'm the managing partner of Growth Strategy Partners, and I'm glad you're here. I actually see a bunch of familiar faces, or at least familiar names, for people that have attended, so that's great. So let's start first by defining, why are we here? Why are you here? Our assumption is that you want to know how to improve your business, how to improve how you execute. And for that, we congratulate you for spending the time here with us. What do we want to convey today? Why are we doing this? What we're trying to do is a couple things. A, we're trying to educate you on what we've learned on how to improve your execution, how to get things done. And we actually want to challenge you to become better, challenge you to break out of maybe some old habits, recognize how well your business is or not performing, and to get better. Now, I say this at times, people go, geez, Chris, I don't need any more challenges in life, thank you very much. Well, we understand that, and so therefore we're going to try to provide you with some tools, some techniques, hopefully a little motivation and desires that you can go make change to your business and improve your business. That's what this is about today. So that's what we hope you leave with. Now, let me first introduce the team we have here today. Some lovely pictures. I'm the good-looking one, I think, on your left side of your screen. I'm Chris DeCenso. I'm the managing partner of Growth Strategy Partners. I've been trying to understand, define, and if not quantify, how do you grow a business, probably for the last 10 years. Some of those years I've spent with Grant Thornton, with Deloitte & Touche, PricewaterhouseCoopers, actually Inc. magazine for a few years. And then before that, I was in industry, manufacturing, distribution, made everything from firearms to electronics to automotive parts and accessories. I think the thing that's maybe of interest to you, I'm an engineer by not only degree, but what I call genetic coding. So a lot of what I do and a lot of how we think is very methodical and science-driven. What I'm doing now is I'm going to pass it over to my partners here, Nancy and Richard. Nancy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Chris. Well, my name is Nancy Wilbur, and I have over 30 years of experience helping small to mid-sized companies grow their sales, their profits, and their talent. And in the last 4 of those years, I've been working as a consultant with Growth Strategy Partners. And I can't tell you how pleased I am to see so many familiar names. I have visual images of so many of you, so thank you very much for joining us today. I love working with companies and helping them take their business to the next level. So welcome, and I hope you get a lot out of today. Richard?
My name is Richard Zahn, and I'm a director of Growth Strategy Partners for the last 17 years. I have been an advisor and consultant to entrepreneurial-minded companies. 7 of those I spent with Inc. Magazine's Growth Strategy Consulting Group, which is where I had the opportunity to get to know and work with Chris. Prior to that, I was an entrepreneur. I've owned or run 3 very different entrepreneurial companies, and don't hold it against me, but many, many years ago in a former life, I was a banker. Unlike Chris, I'm not the engineer. I tend to be more like Pigpen in the Peanuts cartoons. I'm a strategic thinker, tend to make things happen and kick up a lot of dust, and appreciate the chance to spend some time with you today.
That's part of what you'll learn and hear a little later is in terms of team design and not necessarily having all the same thinkers. That's how Richard and I complement each other. Now, you'll hear our voices throughout today. You can't see us, so to help you understand who's speaking at times, you probably picked up a little accent with Richard. Okay, so Richard's the guy wearing the hat. When you hear that southern accent, that's Richard. Okay, let's talk about quick overview of Growth Strategy Partners. What do? We are what I call a research-based consulting firm working with, and Richard actually used the term entrepreneurially minded organizations. Okay, so we're talking about owners, executives that have a vision for their business. They want to grow it. They want to get there faster. They want to get there more efficiently. And they want to grow not only their revenues, but they want to grow their profits and their talent. And so we work with these type of, we call entrepreneurially minded organizations to help them grow their revenues, profits, and talent faster and more efficiently than they can on their own. Now, how do we do that? We can do that because first we've done a lot of research to identify what do you have to do, what do you have to focus on to grow. We're going to talk today a lot about execution and actually get into focus. Well, when you're trying to grow a business, that big picture growth, what do you have to do? There's so many things you have to do in running your business. Well, we went out and identified what do you have to do. We've also developed, we call these tools, rapid implementation tools and methodologies so that we can implement these keys very quickly. And as you've heard, our consultants here, our previous presidents, CEOs, business owners, we've been there, done that, if you will. And this is actually how we describe Growth Strategy Partners. Kind of the center of our core is the research we've done on growing a business. And we surround that with great tools and phenomenal consultants. Now, let me share with you real quickly these, what we call our 7 keys to growth. So the research we've done with over 600 successful CEOs, successful executives, and a lot of third-party research that goes to this picture, this big database, quantifiable to identify how do you grow a business. Are there some keys, some fundamentals, some success stories that makes a business successful? And the answer is yes. There's actually 7 of them, and that's why we call it the 7 keys to growth. These are what these companies implement to be successful. They design and implement an effective growth plan. That's their strategic plan and the process to support that. They identify the right people and they put them in the right seats and they make them successful. They develop, we call advanced customer management programs. They're targeting niche customers, niche segments, and providing unique solutions to them. There's robust processes. This is about making profits in your business. They also differentiate their products and services, so it's not a me-too product and service. They have strong core values that carries them through potentially bad economies, maybe bad leaders, maybe bad products and services. And then you'll see here at the bottom is ability to execute, getting things done. Successful organizations realize in order to be successful, in order to grow, they need to get things done. So that's a little overview of Growth Strategy Partners. We love working with our clients. We've been very, very successful, and hopefully we'll share with you some of the things we've done today, specifically around this 7th key here, the ability to execute. Let's talk first about some of the themes that we're going to share with you today. First thing when it comes to execution is this. How well are you performing? Okay? We talk about growth being relative. We'll also talk about performance, executing. How well are you performing? And we're going to talk a little about that. We'd also like you to understand there are some components to execution. How do you take execution and break it down into some smaller segments, components, activities? We're going to share that with you today. And then, most importantly, it's up to you. If you want to make a change in your business, you need to break out. There's a very popular, common definition of insanity, trying to do the same thing and expecting different results. Well, it's going to be up to you, whether you are the president, the senior vice president, manager on the floor. It is going to be up to you to make an impact on this business. So these are the 3 themes that we're going to share with you today. How are you performing? Understand the components and realize that it's up to you. Now let's start with defining execution. If you're executing well, what are you doing? You're outperforming the competition, your industry, your peers. And when we talk about outperforming, we're talking about not just growing your revenues, but again, growing your profits, growing the talent, growing the people in your business. We're also going to talk about execution not just being tactical. Okay, we're going to talk about the strategic perspective of execution. Many organizations think that they do well because they get the daily things done. That is what we consider very tactical. We're going to talk also about the strategic longer-term goals of the business. And again, that's the 3rd bullet is if you're executing well, you're setting goals and you're achieving measurable goals and obtaining results. And we'll talk about that. Do you set goals? How well do you set goals? How well do you execute? And then if you execute well, you have a process to manage the changing business conditions, the market environment, competitors, internal changes. You've got a process in place. So, first thing we'd like to ask you, share with you, is help you understand or even define how well are you executing. How well is your business executing? And now we're going to do this looking at not just how you do, but how you perform relative to the competition. I'd actually say if you execute well, then you focus on, you've got better results, financial, profits, talent, and you set these goals and achieve them. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick poll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch here a quick poll, and the poll is going to ask you how well is your company executing. And what I'd like you to do real quickly is to click on one of those bullets, one of those radio buttons, and respond. Are you consistently outperforming the competition or just above average? Is it average performance, below average, or is it, let's say, as an F, we have no idea how we're executing, okay? You'll hear a little later today when we talk about execution. Again, it's relative to others in your industry, competition, the local geography. How well are you performing? So I'm going to give about 15 more seconds here, and we're going to show, I'm going to close the poll, and then I'm going to show, I think we've got just about everybody here, a couple more coming through. And the real thing is first for you to understand how well you, how do you think you're executing, and how do you think everybody else thinks how well performing as they're executing also. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this poll, and let me just write down some numbers here, and we're going to share this with everybody, and you can see, and what I'm going to do, let's see if we can share this here. Everyone should be seeing now the results. And what you should see, Nancy and Richard, do you see these results also, by the way?
Yes, we do. You know, I'm really pleased to see that there's nobody who scored themselves an F, you know, which is basically they have no idea how they're executing. I mean, everybody has at least some idea.
You think they're all being honest, Nancy, or you think someone's just saying, geez, I can't give myself an F?
I'm hoping that they're being honest. You know, I like the fact that 41% of these folks are rating themselves above average, and almost 10%, you know, 9% are consistently outperforming the competition. So I think we have a pretty good group here of people who are doing pretty well. But, you know, there's always room for improvement. So even those of you who are consistently outperforming the competition, I'll bet you'll get some good ideas that you haven't thought of before from today's session.
Nancy, this looks like a, you know, I don't know, is it a vertical bell curve? You know, you got the majority of people, you know, 44% giving themselves an average performance.
Correct.
A little less, 41% saying above average, 9%, you know, consistently outperforming. You know, I'd probably say some of those are lying also, but we won't go down that path. You know, there's no giving themselves.
But, hey, Chris, I've got an idea. If we've got some people who are consistently outperforming, maybe we can add them to the panel, and they can, you know, share some best practices.
I like
what
that.
Do you think?
I like that.
Okay.
Just send me, those that hit that 9%, send me a little question, a little chat saying, you know, you'd be happy to contribute. Let me do this. So let me, I guess the point, though, here, Nancy, is that, you know, we've got a lot of average, maybe some above average, but not a lot consistently outperforming. And that's hopefully what they're here for and what they want to learn today. So I'm going to hide this. First, thank everybody for contributing. I'm going to hide this. And now I'm going to move on to the components of execution. Let's get into it now to understand what are the components of execution. As you've heard, I am an engineer. I think like an engineer. And we try to segment or put into some little categories or, you know, graphics, if you will, most everything we do. This gets back into the methodologies and tools that we have. And we've done some research on execution, and the goal is to identify what are the best practices in terms of execution. What you'll see, what we find is that there's really two components to execution. There's a cultural / organizational piece where we'll talk about the leadership, the alignment of leadership, this culture of accountability. This is what is more referred to as the soft side. This is the almost how you do it. And on the right side, you'll see what we call the mechanical and or technical components of execution, which gets into defining your goals and identifying the resources with the right skills, putting in measures of success and linking those measures and goals and resources to incentives. So what we're going to do now is go through each of these components of execution, and what I'm going to do is to pass first over to Nancy, and Nancy's going to talk about the cultural aspects. Even though you need both, cultural is extremely, extremely important. So Nancy, I'm going to pass this to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. You know, our heading here is how to fix your brain, and I'll just tell you right honestly right now, we're not going to be doing brain surgery today, but what we do want to bring to your attention is that you need to have a certain amount of self-awareness about what you're good at and what you like to do. You heard Chris describe himself earlier as being kind of a left brain guy. He's logical, he's analytical, he's linear, and he likes, you know, continuing few tasks. You know, he's got a plan of action. He's got to march right through it. Richard and I have a tendency to be more right-brained, okay? We're more creative and visionary. We like new things. We're much more likely to be random. Richard described himself as a little bit like Pigpen from the Peanuts comic strip. And we're always looking for new things. We don't really like repetition. We do like change. And there's no right way or wrong way for your brain to be. It just, you know, is what you have, you know, what your strengths and your interests are. But the interesting part of that is that some of the research that's been done on entrepreneurs shows that many of you probably on the webinar today have a tendency toward the right brain side. You're the visionaries who created your company. You have the ideas. You're driving the strategic direction for your firm. So let's take a look at what are some of the things that you can do to get a greater balance in your organization. So if we look to the right on the top, we see the fix for people who are right-brain people. The first one is to seek therapy, and I know we have a clinical psychologist on the call today. She's probably very willing to help anybody who wants some therapy about being a right-brain person.
She's helped you a little, Nancy. I know that.
Well, she has. She has. It's Linda Pusey who's on the call with us today. But the idea here is for people who are right-brain, it's a good idea to kind of start with small tasks. Kind of try to chunk a big project so that you know you're consistently making some progress, and recruit a left brain person. I'll tell you that when I started a company for a group of investors in New York a few years back, the very first hire I made was someone who was really strong on the left brain skills. You know, that was kind of how they thought, and I felt as a result we made much better decisions because I was balanced from my creative visionary side with somebody who was analytical, linear, and logical. So that was really a great way to balance our team and to make it a successful team. If, on the other hand, you're more left-brained, you might want to try to expand your thinking. And, of course, you can imagine that Richard and I are really pushing Chris all the time with new ideas. Start painting and recruit a right-brain person, somebody who, you know, does have that visionary look, likes to do new things, because they'll help you balance out your organization. So what you need to do is, you know, figure out how to do it and then commit to doing it. Or if you can't do it yourself, okay, it we're talking about now is execution. If you find that you're so right-brained that you're not really interested in, you know, following up and making sure that everything's on track, you need to either commit to doing it yourself and learn those skills, or you need to hire somebody to do it for you. And that might be either someone that you add to your organization, as I did, or hiring a consultant or a coach who can help you stay on track. Richard and
Nancy, this is Richard, and I just wanted to interject thinking about that as when I was a right-brained entrepreneur, a couple of things that helped me, and we'll talk about, use this word later, of accountability, but I found that it was helpful to have someone that I respected that knew me and helped hold me accountable for execution. In one case, that was a consultant. In another case, it was a board that I had that knew my strengths and weaknesses, knew the company, and held me accountable for executing on the things we need to execute. So that's another thought that, at least in my experience, helped me personally.
Now, Richard, you made a comment about when you used to be a right brain or you used to be an entrepreneur.
When I was an entrepreneur, I'm still right brain.
Okay, just checking.
Okay.
One last little story on this is that I was watching actually a Discovery or some channel the other day, and they had some insights on a race car team, and they were showing kind of behind the scenes of a race car team, pit crews, and all that. And they actually had they were showing one of the team meetings that they had, and they had 15, 20 people sitting around conference room just like you would a regular business meeting. But they started by showing the general manager, I think, or the COO, whatever they called him, said, let me show you our team, because, and he actually had these little charts, these little graphics that showed the behavioral profile. It wasn't the DISC, this DISC profile, but it's something similar, where they said, let me show you the different behaviors and different type of personalities, basically the different types of brains that we have in the room. And he was going on to explain how he actually was a very left brain, very logical, very, very sequential, and he had other people on his team that were very different from him to make that balanced team. And that's what really was interesting. Just here we have race car drivers doing the same thing.
That's great, Chris. I think we want to talk next about getting your leadership team in alignment, because it's important to get everyone on the same page within the organization. I recently conducted a strategic growth analysis with a company out west, and what I found was that the owner, who was a right brain person, developed a plan in his head, and he really thought that his leadership team was on board with that plan. But when I went in and interviewed each one of them, I found that not one manager was able to tell me the goals, strategies, or plans that the owner had in his head. So one of the things you need to do is make sure you share your priorities and gain the buy-in from your people. I think you often do that best when you involve them in the planning process. But you need to have that constructive dialogue so that if someone does have reservations, as my partner Gary did, who was my second in command, he was able to articulate what his concerns were, and I could listen to him and know that if I made a decision, I knew both sides of what could go right and also what might not go so right. You need to make sure that not only you, but also the whole team is committed to action, and that they have complementary behaviors, and that you align your incentives. In other words, the pay for performance is all around accomplishing those goals. We've got a little org chart graphic there in the right-hand corner, and one of the things that you would want to do is make sure that you're cascading your goals not only across the organization, so that the peer group that is just say below you, if you're the CEO or president or owner, but also down through the organization, so that you have both the vertical as well as the horizontal alignment around accomplishing the goals. If you don't have written goals, strategies, or plans, unfortunately, success sometimes becomes a matter of luck. So it's really up to you. Do you want to just rely on luck, or do you want to make sure that you drive for accountability? Let's assume that you get your leadership aligned. So what's next for that? Well, accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or account for one's actions and results. So it's not just trying hard, okay? It's about accomplishing what you set out to do. Earlier in my career, I was an officer of a $150 million company. And one of the things that I found was that we'd sit at our officers' meeting once a quarter and we'd talk about, what are the goals, what are we trying to accomplish, and often people would report on a performance that was not really what was expected. In this particular organization, it all had to do with on-time delivery, and we had set a standard for what we expected. So the director of operations would report on-time delivery, and lo and behold, we wouldn't have made our numbers. Well, the issue here is, what are you going to do about it, okay? That's what accountability is all about. It's not just reporting on it. It's taking responsibility and accountability. So if you're in charge of on-time delivery and you haven't made your numbers, you need to be able to say, here's what we're going to do in order to fix it. So are you holding your people accountable? Are your goals the kind of goals that you expect to be completed? Are they real? Are there reward or punishment systems in place to reward good performance? Do you have a process to review and update performance so that you're not only looking at what the result is, but you're making some moderation to your plans to fix problems that might occur? And do you reward and recognize success? You know, there's a variety of ways that we can fail in the leadership role, and let's take a look at some of these things because perhaps they're things that you inadvertently do. For example, do you sometimes show up late for meetings? If you do, or if you allow a culture of that, you're sending a message that this is not important. And, you know, where execution is concerned, it's all about making sure that everybody is doing what they need to do. So you need to role model it, and you really can't blink, okay? If you hold meetings that don't have goals or they don't have an agenda, you know, chances are they're just kind of either gripe sessions or gab sessions, and not much is getting accomplished. You need to make sure that you're reviewing, you know, previous action items or critical action items to make sure that you're making the progress and taking corrective action. And when actions aren't completed, you can't just say, oh, okay, you know, and just let it go. You really need to make sure that people are taking those corrective actions they need to take. And lastly, you need to make sure that you're removing obstacles so that people are not, you know, struggling against some, you know, some obstacles that could get in their way.
Nancy, when we talk about execution and we talk about all the different challenges companies have with executing, where do you think, where does leadership fit, you think, in terms of the most important, biggest challenge, you know, in terms of executing, getting things done? Is it number 1? Is it number 10 out of 10? Where do you think it fits?
I think it's absolutely number 1. And, you know, that's why, you know, I think we've all been talking about it's all up to you, because the buck stops with the person at the top of the organization. I don't care what their title is, but that person who is driving the organization, who's, you know, setting the strategic direction, and who's making sure that the company is working toward accomplishing it. That type of leadership is absolutely critical to the success of the company, to accomplishing those goals and strategies, to making sure the plans are met, and delivering on those strategic results. I mean, obviously we've seen that, we hear it a lot, and part of one of today's themes is this, you know, self-realization about how well you're performing or not. And this is where, you know, I think every person, whether you're the CEO, manager, whatever it might be, has maybe a little false expectations or false beliefs of how well they're performing personally. I know, you know, at times I think I'm doing a great job, and Nancy and Richard are very, very kind to remind me, you know, maybe how not so. And I guess this, one of the big points for today is how well do you, people listening, think you're performing, and how honest are you with yourself? Because if you're not honest, you know, you're gonna get stuck in this paradigm or this insanity of doing the same thing over and over again. So I guess we just want to emphasize a little more on the leadership side and how important it is you yourself to recognize and maybe make change to where you're at. Sure, and you don't have to be the head of the organization. You can be the head of a department or the person who's responsible for something. I think the best companies are those who drive leadership down through the entire organization.
Okay.
I would like to kind of link accountability with culture now, because that was one of the critical components that we had talked about. Culture is, you know, a combination of shared values, attitudes, standards, beliefs, and behaviors that characterize the members of an organization and define its nature. So, you know, for example, indicators of a non-accountable culture would be if you, as the president or owner, you have everybody else has action items, but you don't have any, okay? that tells people that you're not willing to step up and take on some responsibilities yourself. Or owners or presidents who don't complete their action items on time, don't complete them well, don't complete them at all. I've heard so many comments from members of organizations like that where they say, well, the boss tells us we got to do this, but, he or she never make their deadlines. So, what's the real message here? What are we really supposed to understand about accountability when the boss doesn't do them themselves? When individuals don't have specific goals, when people aren't measured on the performance against those goals, that's an indication of a non-accountable type of culture. Or when meetings end, and at the end of the meeting there's no summary of, okay, here's what we decided, here are the action items we've defined, here's what we've learned from our reviews and the corrective action we're going to take. All those kinds of things are critically important to making sure that everybody understands where we stand and what it is we need to do in order to accomplish that. And then lastly, people leave the office even when tasks aren't completed. So, people are just, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to go, and they walk out the door when something that may be critical for a client with an important deadline the next day, they haven't taken the action that they need to take. And I know this resonates with some of the folks who are in the audience today because I know your businesses and I know what the challenges are there. So if any of these thoughts resonate with you, you need to work on culture because culture drives execution. So now Chris is going to share the mechanical side of execution. Chris?
Nancy, this is Richard. Before you jump to that, I want to offer, and I may be the only entrepreneur, owner, operator that ever had this challenge, but a little bit different twist on what you just said. I had a tendency to allow people to give me all the task rather than holding those who were responsible to me accountable for not just raising a problem, but also coming up with solutions and then holding them accountable to perform on it. Sometimes it seemed easier for me just to take it and do it, but what I did was it undermined the ability to build an accountable culture where everybody was accountable. So I may be different than others, but that was an issue that I struggled with early in my management career.
Well, Richard, I've seen others who have had that similar problem. I call it upward delegation, okay, where your direct reports are delegating something up to you. And, sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap because you do know the answers. But, by taking over that responsibility, you're not letting them develop and, and stretch themselves to learn how to be successful in that particular project or assignment. So, yeah, I have seen that before as well.
Doesn't this go back to the leadership piece we talked about earlier? You've got, quite often the culture of the organization, as we talked about, is driven by the leader or leadership, if you will. And if leaders, do it all themselves, if you will, don't delegate, that's one extreme. If leaders don't do anything, you get into the right-brain creative, owners that we work with that love doing the new things. They love getting out there, either meeting customers. We had a client of ours that his wasn't his title, but he called himself the head of schmooze. It didn't include closing business. It just was out there schmoozing. Okay, and I think that's a big piece of how well an organization does or does not execute. We're actually out on a sales call. I think early this week, and the company's gone through some strategic planning exercises, but they're still looking to do it again for the third time because they haven't executed well. And when I asked the question, I got 5 or 6 people on the team sitting around the room, and I asked them, well, why they having challenges executing. First it was quiet because everyone was looking at each other. But then the owner, rightly so, said, well, it's got to be my fault. I'm in charge here. I did not hold people accountable. We put some good plans together. We probably didn't execute as well. And he went on to explain how he's more of a right-brain creative person. So it's classic where, if the culture doesn't have this accountability to it, it's usually driven by the leader. Fair?
Makes sense. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk now about, as Nancy was saying, the mechanical side of execution. We've talked about the cultural piece in terms of the need for leadership, the leadership team to be aligned, and not just the leadership team, but literally the whole organization aligned on what needs to be done and having a culture of accountability. Now let's talk about, what I call about the mechanical side of defining the goals and providing resources and measures and links to incentives, because this now is going to combine with the left side, the cultural side, to make execution successful. So let's first start by talking about the goals. In fact, I'm going to show you a system. How does this work within your business? Where do you start? Well, you obviously start with defining some goals for the business. This gets into one of the themes we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, was about strategic in addition to tactical execution. So if you're going to grow, if you're going to be successful, we need some more strategic goals for the business. Growing revenues, growing profits, growing talent are the three categories we talk about, but goals around your customers and different pieces of your business. Once you define the goals, from the goals, then you will build what we call, or is commonly referred as the strategies. What are the strategies you're going to use to accomplish these goals? If you want to grow the business, grow profits, how are you going to get there? From the strategies, now you've got this cascading terminology effect being used, where the strategies drive actions. What are the actions that are going to be taken specifically to accomplish a strategy to achieve the goal? And then where do those actions get linked to? This is the resources we're going to talk to, which is the people. You'll see here that, even though it's just a simple graphic, we don't have many actions. Actually, we only have really 1 to 2 actions linked to an individual. Okay, and the point here is, you can't overload the individual. We're going to get to that later. Now, so here we've got this cascading of goals to strategies to actions to people. Now, the wrap here is what we call key performance indicators, KPIs. You may have heard that before. And these KPIs, these are the little dashboards or metrics that are linked to strategies, that are also linked to the actions. Okay, and then you put this into a key performance indicator or dashboard that you'll hear about to understand how well you're performing. And then once you have that, then you'll see down below, we link the incentive system, which is now linked around the people, linked to the actions, the strategies, and the goals. So this is actually what I'm going to walk you through right now. This is the macro view, if you will. So first, let's start with goals. When you think about execution, when you think about getting things done, one of the things you've probably heard is less is more. If you focus on less, you'll get more done. And that is very, very true. I use an analogy of juggling. I used it the other day. I said, geez, if you're juggling 1 ball, that's very easy. If you're juggling, 2, it gets a little more harder. 3, 4, and 5 balls, it's very complicated, and you'll drop something. And then someone was very nice to remind me that, Chris, if you have 1 ball in your hand, you're not juggling. Okay? I get the point. So first, when we're talking about goals, let's focus on actionable goals. Let's first focus on not a lot of goals, but let's focus on them that you can act on. This is a little framework here. It's actually a framework of the balanced scorecard, which is best practice in strategic planning. And it talks about looking at 4 perspectives of your business. The perspectives are financial, customer, okay, process or internal parts of your business, and people, sometimes referred to as learning and growth. And the way this works is you set your financial goals, and to achieve your financial goals, you would then identify some customer goals. You may need some processes developed internally to support the customer goals, and you then may need some people goals or some training education to achieve the process goals, to achieve the customer goals, to achieve the financial goals. So this is a little cascading framework called the balanced scorecard. But what you'll see in each of these goals is that they have a verb, a noun, a target, some numbers, a time frame that they're going to get done by, and an owner. Now, you don't see the owners on the financial because, again, financial are typically end results. But if you look here on the customer side and you're trying to create a goal within your business that you can achieve, we're going to talk about penetrating 65% of all the existing customers by cross-selling over the next 2 years. And when we're grumpy here, that's going to be the owner of this one. Obtain 3 new $36,000 clients in the mid-market by year-end, okay, year-end 12/31. So what you'll see is the first thing we've done is create what we call quantifiable goals. And what I'm going to do is we're actually going to take one of these goals and cascade it through, okay, the business. But first, we're going to look at the bigger picture of the strategy. So we've talked about goals. Now we've got strategies. This is a typical framework we use to help our clients understand if you're going to grow, if you're going to improve your revenues, your profits, where's it going to come by? Where's it going to come from? And this is a standard framework that says you can grow by, here's real interesting here, you've got existing customers and you've got existing products and services. You could grow your business by penetrating more of your existing customers with your existing products and service. Now, there's something unique. I know you never heard that before. But when you look at this framework, and you look now at going into this quadrant 2, which is new customers, selling existing products to existing customers. 3 would be existing customer sales with new products, and 4 would be new customers and to new products and services. Now, that framework isn't very sophisticated. But here's my question. If you're going to execute, if you're going to achieve some goals, and that goal is to, let's say, grow $1 million this year, is that growth coming from cross-selling in quadrant 1, getting new customers, getting new products and services, or both? And, of course, your answer is, well, yes, Chris. The answer is yes. My point is, how can you achieve a goal if you can't measure it? So you need to define where is that growth coming from, quantifiably. And here you'll see that, for example, this $1 million goal, 65% of that growth is going to be coming by selling to existing customers to existing products. And it actually equates to $650,000. And you can see that this sample, this company, is going to grow mostly through cross-selling. They're going to have some new customer growth, some new product growth, and very little mix of the two. Now, here's where this is important. Real live example where we were working with a client, and we asked the client, where's the growth going to come from? And the owner wasn't very clear. And I tried to get very specific, and I said, well, when your salespeople go out and make a sales call, how many of those sales calls are going after, let's say, new customers or existing customers? And, oh, by the way, what are they selling? And after the long discussion, pulling teeth, if you will, he said, well, I think, 80% of those sales calls are to new customers and 20% are existing. So you have this 80 over here and 20 over here. Now, when we did some analysis on the business, and obviously through their help, we realized and they realized that they had much more opportunity to sell to existing than to new. And I'm not going to go into details of how we identified that, but there was a huge market opportunity in existing. And now they changed this quadrant 1 to 80%, and then this to 20%. So they actually reversed what it was at the beginning. Now, what does that do? It directs their salespeople to go after existing customer sales versus new. And as you know and heard, it's easier to sell to an existing customer than a new customer. So we did this exercise with this client, and then we got very specific on which customers they were going to target and what they were going to sell them to. And same thing in each of these different quadrants. So now that we've identified, we've got the goals, we've got the strategy, if you will, based on 4 quadrants. We're getting a little more specific on the companies that are going to be sold to and maybe the services that are going to be sold. Now we're getting specific. Now people can start acting on this. Let me go to the third piece of this puzzle, which is the action items. So you saw our goal of adding 3 new clients, generating $36,000 each year by year end. Now we're bringing that down to be more specific. We identified 2 architectural firms, 1 engineering firm. And now, what are the actions that are going to be taken to achieve that goal? Well, we're going to touch, if you will, 16 new prospects twice a month by June. We're going to send some articles to them, and we're going to conduct some webcasts. We're going to also conduct some sales calls. Now, those are pretty good actions because we've got some quantification, we've got a timing, and we got a frequency, if you will. But even still, we need to take that to even more detail because we now need to know when's it going to happen. So now we're into taking these milestones, these action items, and creating what we call a milestone calendar. And so now you can measure and see how well it's being performed. And you'll see here that here's the sales calls. We expect to have 3 meetings in February, 4 in March, 7, 7, and 9. And here's the articles, what the topic is going to be and when they're going to go out. Any events that we have, when are they going to be, and how are they going to be conducted. Now what we can do is we can review this in in February. We would have met and looked at, did we have 3 meetings? Did we have that article sent out? Did we have 4 meetings in March? And you can start color coding this to identify the stoplight, the red, green, yellow, to see if it's being accomplished or not. So we've now taken those actions and we've put them into a calendar. So now you can actually see if you're getting things done. Now, the thing we're going to add to this, we started talking about after the actions, is metrics. We need to measure performance. Companies that are successful, organizations that are successful measure their results. So at the very beginning we had a poll, and I think the question was asked, how well are you performing? What I would have, loved to pick into greater details is, can you quantify your growth versus somebody else's? Or is it just I feel like we've done better, we've done well? Well, metrics are what we call indisputable. This will actually say, did I have the 3 meetings? Did we grow 20% or so through new customers? Now, ideally you want these metrics to be a ratio, not just a single dimension, i.e. revenues or profits. But start looking at your revenues per person, okay, or your chargeable hours if you're a professional service firm, per project. What's the win ratio? If you're gonna go out and get more business, it would be nice to know what your closure rate is, so then you can figure out how many sales calls you need to make to get the goals that you're achieving. We talk about leading indicators, sales calls, sales meetings, proposal win ratio. It's imperative that you put some metrics in place. We're working right now with an organization, that's over $50 million. It's been around, I think we're on the 2nd generation. And they're missing some basic metrics like new customers, existing customers, sales, if you will, sales by new products, that 4 quadrants I showed you earlier. So part of what we're doing is helping put those metrics in place so we can see how well the company's performing. And when we do that, we actually create what we call a dashboard. We create these trending charts. So we're not just looking at this month and previous month or this month and previous month of the year before, but we're looking at trends. And what we're trying to find out is, are we getting better? Are we improving our performance? Now, these here, from a tool perspective, have been created with that highly sophisticated tool called Microsoft Excel. Nothing elaborate, but it does the job. So, do you have metrics in your business? Do you have a dashboard? Next thing you need to do is the resources. Okay? This is a key piece. Usually people have too much to do. They're overloaded. They may not be motivated. They may not be bought in, if you will. This is where you, as a leader in the organization or department, need to sit with the individual and help them understand what are they doing, how they're going to accomplish it, do they have the tools and skills, do they understand how they're going to be measured. Now, one of the questions we get asked a lot is, and it's usually from the 2nd, 3rd tier down, whatever, if you will, is they say, well, geez, Chris, the boss keeps coming to me and asking me if I can do this, if I can do this, if I can do that. And, geez, I can't say no to the boss, can I? Well, in so many words, I say, yes, you can. Because it's not a matter of can you do this. It's a matter of are you doing this versus the other 6 things that they gave you last week or the week before. So one of the tools we suggest employees use is when someone says, hey, can you do this, and it's a big project, not just something small, is, oh, sure, I'd be happy to do that. Now, you've asked me to do these 5 other things, and as you realize, you can't keep adding more on. So where's the priority of this? Where does it fit? And then you can help that boss, if you will, not overload you. Now, one more piece, we're going to take these actions, and this is a way to kind of like a job description, but it's taking the individual goals and making them quantitative. So in this case here, business development person has 60% of their goals built around developing programs to retain existing clients and get new ones. 30% about building a process and tools, and 10% of improving their personal sales and marketing skills. Okay? This is now taking the action items at the individual level and making it very clear where is the priority, where is the focus. Then the last link to this is what we call the link to incentives. So how do you pull this all together? Well, the company ideally now has put together their goals. They have some revenue goals, net income goals, sales goals. Okay, these are all the goals, the strategic goals for the business. And then you obviously have the people in the organization here, president, finance, heads of each of these departments. And then what we're going to do is we're going to identify how important, how much of a priority does these revenue goals match to the function. And that is this matrix in the middle. And so what you'll see here is that everybody is linked to revenue and everybody's linked to net income. And obviously these goals would be defined in a number. But you'll also see that the president's responsible for reducing costs by 35% of his goal and improving quality 15%. Now, for the sake of time, we're not going to go into great detail, but the point here is if you're, let's just say, where's that goal I had? If you had to improve the culture, we've been talking about culture today, and you are now in charge of sales, of which 15% of your goal is linked to, or even HR, which has 30%. Do you think if you're in HR that you might need some help from operations or finance or the president, especially the president, to improve the culture? Geez, the president's not linked to improving the culture. Nancy, who are we talking about being the biggest culprit?
We were talking about the leadership, absolutely.
Right? So the leader's not linked in here. Mm-hmm. So this is where that leader should be linked in for aligned goals. This is alignment that Nancy even brought up earlier. Okay, so let me jump here and summarize what we've gone through.
Before you do, I don't know if you want to do that first or if you want to poll the group to find out what some of their obstacles are to execution. Because
Nancy, that's a good question. I'm glad we have you here. So let me go and use this cool, funky tool and launch this poll which says, what are your top obstacles to great performance? And what I'm going to ask you to do is to go click on, I think actually on this one, Nancy, they can click more than one. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So if there are several of these that apply to their companies, be sure to click more than one button.
So are you lacking defined goals? Do you not have any measures of performance? Do you lacking people with the right skills? Oh, there's that leader not driving the results. Let's see how many click on the leaders. Now the interesting thing, Nancy, would be, are there not, non-leaders, if you will, or senior execs on the phone that are going to pick on the leaders, or are there leaders that are going to check off their own box?
Probably, but it could be both. Because let's face it, even people who are a little further down in the organization, they need to be leaders of their own functions, and they need to take responsibility for their own execution.
We didn't get into that much at all about how, although we've been focused on the top down, which is obviously very important and really could make or break this, but that the supporting people in the organization can have this groundswell, if you will. Whether the 4 or 5 people in the executive team, 20 people in the sales department, whatever it might be, can band together, if you will, and build their own little success story that gets spread throughout the company. We've built that before when we knew we had some challenges with leaderships.
Right, and those are often the people who get promoted into more areas of more responsibility and authority too.
Yeah, well, they get things done, right?
Exactly.
All right, let me close this poll here. I just got about everybody on voting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to share it. And where's my share button here? So here's the share. I hope everybody can see this now. I can see the results here. Nancy, you want to take a quick peek and maybe make a comment on this? And Richard?
Well, I have to say I'm not terribly surprised at the responses of lack of defined goals or not measuring performance or holding people accountable. Those are both 67% because it's, I know from talking to many clients that I meet with and prospective clients that haven't chosen to move forward with us yet, that they're often struggling with those particular concepts, getting those really defined goals, not just kind of general, hey, we want to do better than last year, but goals that, speak to specific numbers. Leaders not driving results, is next. That's 44%. And, we recognize that leaders need to take on that role, and maybe for some right-brain folks, it's been a little hard for them to do it. So hopefully we've given them some action plans to follow. And then, of course, the last, in terms of popularity, we're lacking people with appropriate skills. So it sounds like, 2/3 of you feel like you really have the right folks, but you may also have a weak culture of execution. That was also 37%.
Well, it's interesting because the 37%, the lowest one is, it's linked with weak culture, but lacking people with skills. So it's not a people issue. It's not a skill issue.
Right.
In fact, if you look, work bottoms up, number 4 is the leaders not driving results. That's not the top priority. It's lack of goals and lack of measures. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, then obviously followed by the leader. But that's interesting because it's saying it's not a leader issue, although I guess I'd have to argue that if the leader doesn't have any goals or the leader has instituted goals and put measures in performance, it would, I guess, fall back to the leader, no?
Sure, it would.
Okay.
Well, I think, Mr. Richard, I think, that speaks to my experience would be similar with this. And, and this is not the sexy, fun part of strategy or planning or running a business. It's the day in, day out journey that we go through, and it's interesting. And a lot of organizations balk at measuring, and therefore things don't get done.
Very good, Richard. We're going to wrap up here in 1 minute, so if anybody has some questions they'd like to ask, we're going to do a quick wrap-up, and then we're going to answer some questions. First, I'm going to just summarize what we went through today. We first shared with you that we've done research to identify that there's actually 7 keys to growing your business, seven business fundamentals, and ability to execute is one of them that we went through with you. We also shared with you the components of execution, both cultural, organizational, if you will, and mechanical, and that there's a definitive process and a way to improve, the way you execute in your business. And I think we saw by the polls, people are challenged with basically all of this, if you will, because it is multidimensional. Let me look here and see if there's any questions, and then we're going to wrap up in 1 more minute. Let's see here. I love this one. I gotta love this one. Defining goals and setting up metrics takes too much time. How can we make this more efficient? I love it. I'm laughing in a good way. Many people, think goal setting and setting up metrics not only takes too much time, but it's too cumbersome. Part of what we shared with you at the beginning and part of what Growth Strategy Partners is trying to do is show you how you can grow more efficiently by putting in tools and methodologies that we've developed. And not necessarily tooting our own horn here, but we've actually defined a way to develop goals and metrics in 2 days, a 2-day workshop that we do. It shouldn't take a lot of time. At the same time, you're never really done. It's a process. It's a journey, if you will. And it's one of these things where if you don't set any goals, and how can you achieve them? So that's my quick answer. Nancy, Richard, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it really well.
Okay. I've got one. Let me do one more here. Then we got to wrap up. We've had to cut staff in the last year. Everyone's overloaded. How do we make sure the important stuff gets done? Richard, you want to take a crack at that one? Do you hear that?
I'll take a quick crack at it in interest of time. One, I think we've already spoken about, and this is a situation we see a lot of. But I think one thing is the concept of really getting clear on what are those 2 or 3 really important key drivers of the success of your business, and really get focused on those. Don't try and take on 10. Get down to 2 or 3 and make them happen, and make them happen this year. Related to that, and many of you may have heard this concept, Jim Collins coined the phrase, building a not-to-do list. Not many of us are good. Most of us have pages of to-do lists. But this is a time when I think you've got to really look at where we spend an energy that we just don't need to do it. And that's true as an organization, and that's true on the individual level. So I would challenge you to think of what are the things you're doing now that either make you feel comfortable or that you're just used to doing that don't really drive the organization toward its goals. And I guess the last thing is just simply calendaring it so that you have time set aside on a regular basis, not to do weekly manager updates of what's going on in my department and this department or that, but to talk about your goals, to talk about the strategy to achieve them, to review the metrics, and just get it on the calendar. And it's a routine of the management cycle.
Thanks, Richard. We've got a few more questions, and what we'll do is we'll try to get back to those that have asked those questions directly. We're just out of time right here. One of the things we've been sharing with you from the beginning is it's up to you. You, the leader, you, the team member, if you're going to improve the way you execute, it's up to you. And it really starts with this brain concept that we talked about earlier. Decide if you're going to use your brain or someone else's. Okay, now what we're referring here is saying, are you going to make a conscious change, a conscious decision that you're going to change your behavior? And if you're right brain, be more left brain. If you're left brain, a little bit more right brain, and hold people accountable. If not, what you need to do is hire somebody or bring someone into the organization to do that for you. It could be a full-time hire. It could be an external consultant like us or anybody else. But decide you're going to do it. Create 2 or 3 strategic goals. Measure their progress. Start small. Obtain some buy-in from the people, not some buy-in. Obtain buy-in from the people on the goals. Are they realistic? Are they achievable? And commit to becoming what we call the A player, the A leader, the A team, the A organization, and the A company. So that if we were to ask you the question at the beginning, as we did again, how well are you performing, how well are you executing, you would give yourself the A. That's what we're trying to do. Now, we hope that we've shared these insights with you today. We hope you've learned something. We hope you've maybe shared some of the passion we have around this. We do be happy to answer any questions. Follow up by email. You'll see our contact information here. We will send out the presentation to those that were here today. We thank you very, very much. Again, if you have any more questions, give us a call. Nancy and Richard, any last comments?
No, I just want to say
Appreciate your
thanks
time.
to
Good luck.
everybody. Yeah, great.
So thanks, everybody. Have yourself a good day. Go execute. We're done.